Hi, everyone. Welcome to 21st Century Saints, our podcast and live stream series. Well, we used to say this whole thing about how we were for Latter-day Saints and people who were adjacent to Mormonism in the UK and around the world. Right now, I don't really know what we are, but we're hanging around this restoration-y, Mormon-y space, and we're evolving. And I'm so glad that we have all of you with us to help us see what this is going to become. So thank you for being with us. We have been looking forward to doing this episode for a very long time. I'm really excited. First of all, Sarah, do you want to say hey? And do we have anything we need to tell the world about before we start?
Hi, everyone. No, we're going to be doing some updates pretty soon on how safeguarding is going. But just to let you know that it's still happening. We're still doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes that people never get to see. But it's happening. Things are moving. Things are going pretty well in the UK church over that. Things are good. So, yeah, that continues. And it's good to have you all with us tonight.
Absolutely. I think we've got a conference coming up soon where we're going to be talking about safeguarding too. And we'll drop all of the details about that as it happens, but that's one to keep an eye out for.
And it's the 18th of June. That's the 18th of June. And we're speaking live at a national conference in the UK, which is looking very much at spiritual abuse. So that will be a really interesting presentation that we will be giving at that conference around the impact of spiritual abuse.
Absolutely. I guess before we jump in tonight, I'm going to do a trigger warning now, and it's not because I'm introducing this guest and our guest needs a trigger warning. Maybe for some people she does, because our friend of many years, Gail Shurteff, tells it like it is, and we think you're going to love her voice because she is so direct and so clear about what she's thinking. It is empowering. So we're really excited to be able to finally have her on the show because we wanted to do this for so long. I first had the privilege of meeting Gail way back when we both attended Sunstone in Glasgow. Sunstone is such a great place for developing and meeting new people, developing relationships. And Gail did a very powerful presentation on the Divine Feminine. With that, knowing what she can do, I've been so excited to hear about this subject tonight. Recently, we had a fantastic conversation with Rebecca Biblioteca, where we were talking about the subject of integrity, and so many things in this space boil down to integrity, marginalization, abuse, safeguarding, and this being the kind of place, the kind of space that we would expect it to be. And Gail had reached out after it because, of course, Rebecca is a delight. We all know that. Had been inspired to sort of write a message, and she came up with almost the title of this episode in this message, and she just in a throwaway comment, she had said, it all goes back to Brother Brigham. Now, I'm going to let Gail explain what she means by that, but we're going to ease you in slowly. Again, a content warning, we may be talking about the tough stuff tonight. We will be talking about the tough stuff tonight. So we're going to hand you over to Gail, and what I'm going to do is just welcome, Gail, to 21st Century Saints. It's lovely to have you with us. Do you want to tell our audience a little bit about who you are, your background, where you're from, and what keeps you in this fascinating space?
Oh my gosh. That's a huge one. Well, let's start at the beginning. And for right now, I'm going to take these off and see how I do without them. Wow, where to start? I have to explain a few things. And to do that, I have to go back to 1958, when there was a rubella outbreak and pandemic. And my mother was pregnant with me at the time. And during the first trimester, she noticed at the very end of it some very faint red dots. Sure enough, she had it. And I popped out, an adorable baby girl with blonde hair and blue eyes. And in 1959, the doctors didn't say, oh, your kid's disabled and these are the issues. They sent the baby home with the parents and let the parents come in when they noticed it. Now, I say that to say that I'm both visually and hearing impaired. And I've been an advocate for those with disabilities since I was about 15 years of age. And I thought that was a lot of my path in life. I became a marriage and family therapist and clinical psychologist in 1994. I have a master's in clinical psych, and I licensed as an MFT in the US. I'm also registered here in the Netherlands on the NIP, which is what we call it, National Institute of Psychology. But my main goal when I was 15, I was looking at careers, and we can talk about that as well, is that I wanted to help families with disabilities. I wanted to work with them and help them explore the dynamics of where they were and what was going on and how things could be done better. But this has a deeper root that we'll go into. My journey as a child in the LDS faith is rather privileged. My father had been known to President McKay and his counselors in the 1940s and 1950s. After World War II, he served a mission in a Spanish American mission, and he basically ran the mission when the mission president was out touring. And in 1962, he got a message from the secretary saying that President McKay wanted to talk to him. Well, he pulled over at a phone booth. And I kid you not, this really happened in a phone booth. President McKay extended the call to him to become the mission president of the Andes mission. We only had 6 weeks. And in that 6 weeks, the doctors decided that I had to have surgery to close a valve in my heart. So my mom didn't get to learn Spanish. We went down there and had an incredible experience, and that's affected me the rest of my life. We came back. So my father had already done bishop, then he did mission president, then he did stake president. So it kind of got out of order. And then at the time, they were calling men as regional reps. My father was one of those who really pushed for the third quorum of the 70. They liked my father. Well, you know what happened. But meantime, I got a very privileged raising in the church. We were fast-tracked into events if we wanted to be. We had general authorities, apostles in our home. I can tell you that Bruce R. McConkie was a delight one-on-one. We actually took him out for a picnic up in the Oakland Hills. And he just stretched back and we just started talking. And my father later drove him to the airport. So we gained this reputation in Salt Lake for not causing anybody to have to sit through some crazy family night. We just had fun. But that was also because my parents were friends with lots of these men. Meanwhile, I'm growing up and I'm feeling something is off, really off, within the church, but also in society. And I couldn't put my finger on it. All I knew is by 9 years old, the LDS church was not safe for me. And by 11, I knew that I was alone. And I went through my adolescence with no friends. I don't say that to have pity. We're going to talk about this. I was severely bullied. And it stems around disability. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about how the disabled are treated.
Gail, if it's okay, I just want to ask a quick question before we get really into it. First of all, a comment, and I think this is for the audience. I feel like if you're getting any Gail's voice sounds familiar vibes like I am, I feel like knowing you and hearing how you speak, and I've never told you this before, but there is a touch of the Carol Lynn Pearsons about whenever Gail is speaking, right? Which is a really big compliment if anyone knows Carolyn Pearson's work. You have a healing voice, and it is and I love that nothing is lost. You're very, very clear in what you're saying. I appreciate it very much. So if I am not quite often I'm doing sort of little vocal cues of yes, and I just feel so engaged with what you're saying. So just please know if I'm not saying anything, I am sitting rapt. I'm really enjoying this.
Don't worry. True form, I am going to turn the tables and we'll do a discussion.
We will. So just to bring us up to speed, so you're not currently a Latter-day Saint. I think that's important just for context for the rest of the conversation. Where are you right now in your spiritual life?
Oh my gosh. Well, long story short, and we did put a trigger warning out. I'm assuming that Sarah has done her
As often as we need to put a trigger warning out and share some details of contact organizations that will offer support, we will do it. So yeah, we've got you as you speak.
Now we're doing it now.
We're doing it.
My husband committed suicide in 2016. He was bipolar, and bipolars don't have a good record for living into their 70s and 80s. Basically because of the nature of the mental illness. We had both been down the rabbit hole by 2006, and he went deeper than I did, and then I caught up. I actually surpassed him in 12. We listened to a very long podcast by Steve Veazey and John DeLynn, and I kept saying, I think I could join that church. Well, in September of 2018, I did. And I was confirmed. And in 2020, I was ordained as an elder. I'm a part of a congregation, community circle, that's based here in Europe. And I serve and minister there. So that's kind of the short journey, or the short version of the long journey.
And it was at that Sunstone that we met, that was when you made your decision to
yeah.
journey with Community of Christ Concrete, right?
Literally, Jane, literally, they had the Why I Stay panel. And I sat down with Richard James afterwards. I said, honey, I need to be baptized and confirmed.
Right.
And, from there, it's what it is. And so I wasn't going to stay any longer. I couldn't. But we'll talk about why that is. I want to talk about why that is.
I think it's important to note that weekend was so powerful because you made that decision, and Gina Colvin, that was when she was that was what led her to Community of Christ too. So yeah, some really powerful stuff happened there. And if what we will do is in the show notes, we will put in a link in the chat so that if you would like to know more about the European congregation, Gail's congregation, what's happening near you, so that you can find that. But yeah, take us to your story. Take us to, let's dive a little deeper. Where would you like to start, Gail?
Oh, wow. Well, I'm going to mention two things first. And that's from the stance of where my voice comes from. So I'm a practicing therapist, but in 2020 to 2022, I felt the call to go back and get certified as a spiritual director. And that I did through San Francisco Theological Seminary. So I also do that now, and it's wonderful work. I think one of the other influences that we need to bring up here is I've been influenced by people from the UK who I've met who are so diplomatic versus the American cowboy shoot 'em up. I really have learned so much. So I'm going to try to be diplomatic with this.
Okay, we lost Gail for just a second. We do have her back. Sorry about this.
We
got you back. There's just been a little blip with the internet. We do apologize. So you're back. So Gail was saying she was going to be diplomatic, which I can reassure her she doesn't have to be. But yeah, you see what you're thinking here.
Yeah. So let's start off by talking about the fact that the disabled have issues within the church, just like the LGBTQIA plus do. And the stories are similar and yet different. There is an undercurrent within the LDS church of not saying what has been quoted. I chose not to bring on the quotes by Brother Brigham because they are so racist, so demeaning, so wrong, that when I first read them, all I could do was sit and cry, and I all but blasted the computer screen. Because they're that bad.
I love that we are not giving quotes that could perpetuate harm. I love that we're not giving them airspace, but I do want to just let the audience know, because Gail has mentioned it when we were chatting before the show, when we were having girl time and hanging out before the show, that you are tackling this in a book. And I think having to face these really difficult things that were said live on air, I think is, we don't need to re-traumatize you or anyone else. But could you maybe talk a little bit about the impact that had on you? When did you find those things out, and how did it change you? what did it help you understand about the path that you were on?
Okay, let's talk about where I found them first. Gina Colvin told me about them. I had not read them up until that moment. All I had was this deep down sinking feeling that things were not right. And as I mentioned, my husband, John, was bipolar. And so we'd have conversations. And I remember him standing in our bedroom and looking at me. He says, "You don't know what I'm going through. I'm supposed to be able to do all these wonderful things in the church. I'm supposed to be this priesthood leader. And yet I'm seen as a disabled man." This is a guy who's 6'1". He looked like Christopher Reeve. And he looked at me, he said, "This just hurts." And that was the first time I'd heard that voice. And I said, "I know." And then reading these quotes that were absolutely awful, and I'm not going to bring them up here. It felt like the Mormon church had slapped me in the face. Now I knew why it was okay to bully Gail. Now I understand why Gail never got asked out on a date, because she wasn't marriage material. She wasn't baby making material. She was less than. And it took a long, long time for me to journey, to be able to look in the mirror and say, "I love myself." Because that's the kind of spiritual abuse it was. So when I say that there are similarities between what a lot of my LGBTQ brothers and sisters go through in the LDS church and what I've been through, it's true. So let's talk about how little kids are treated. In some wards and states, especially in the US, there are special needs primaries.
Mm-hmm.
But the further out you get, it's not going to be happening.
Well, first of all, could I ask maybe if I'd like to dig into this in a sort of specific way. At the beginning of the show, you had talked about how it's a society problem and it's a Mormon problem. It plays out in particular ways and dials it up when that's the community that you're experiencing that maybe doesn't have the same strategies or safeguarding underpinnings that would happen perhaps in a school or other situations. So these things may still happen and do happen, but also it's happening within a very small community and often behaviours are reinforced. I am struck, I think, by the fact that you are speaking about, and it's possibly the first time we've really dug into it in this way in the show, bipolar, having a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and you making it very, very clear that this is a disability. You speaking about your experience through childhood, through adolescence, through adulthood. You are speaking about disability. You're speaking about about marginalization, yes, and that's where it intersects with LGBTQ communities and with people of color. But what interests me when it comes to disability, you make no difference between mental health and physical health, and that is beautifully done. So I think I'd like to come back and revisit the mental health side of things, because I know that's where you do a lot of your work. But talk to me a bit about childhood and growing up in the church, and what messages. So you're being bullied from quite a young age. And what I think most of our audience would experience are children with disabilities or additional support needs being pedestalized. These are celestial children. These children don't need, spiritual support in the same way that we all do. We have to get up to this standard. So these are holy, sacred children, but they tend to not be allowed to think and feel anxious, and us really to have to do a lot of work with them and for them, and meet those gaps. Talk to me a little bit about, weren't you pedestalized as a child? That's what happens, right? That's what happens.
Oh, yes and no.
Right.
The outward appearance is we are pedestalizing everybody.
Yes.
They use theodicies to do it. So a theodicy is, for instance, when somebody dies, oh, they're in such a little better place now. Heavenly Father needed them. Things like that. I won't go into all of them. So
let's tell you what. Shall we let the audience go? Sorry, you go first, Sarah, and then I'll come back.
Yeah. What messages did you get from your parents when you were growing up, Gail, about having disability and the gospel and the church and eternity and pre-existence? What messages were you given?
Okay. So I was not given anything specifically. I was actually sheltered from a lot of it until I was older. So I did not know. And this is why it's like I had this sinking feeling in my gut. So the message I got from my parents was, we loved you. The message, and then my father opened up to me when I was 16. He said, well, I thought you'd just be I gave you this baby blessing, and I thought for certain you would just grow up to be a blind bride. And that's the first red flag. He thought I'd get married. And this is where cognitive dissonance comes in. How do you explain, oh, you're so special, with the theodicy or with the treatment that, oh, you're not, because you were not valiant in the pre-existence, because you were less than in the pre-existence, because you were a fence sitter. You begged for a body, and you were willing to take any body, even a defective one.
Gail, Alan in the comments has said that he feels sure that you felt sickened by the utterance of Harold B. Lee about disabilities, race, and national origins, about those people not being valiant in the premortal existence. Sarah, also this week, you were looking at those quotes quite a lot this week, and they are very disturbing. Yeah, so how did it feel for you being told that was where you came from, you chose?
You know what? I was sheltered from it. Because of the privilege I had. My parents were able to shelter me from some things. Not all, but some. I can't imagine what some of the adult developmentally delayed people that I worked with went through, because they didn't have the privilege I had. I
Gail,
imagine.
Gail, I guess it would have been really difficult and confusing for you as a child being bullied at church, because that's a place people are meant to be nurtured and safe, and for you to go there and be bullied is incredibly confusing and upsetting and scary.
It was
the bullying specifically people focusing on your particular disabilities and the sort of cruelty that people can show around that?
It was bullying around disability in general, and I was the only one who was out there that way.
Right.
I think that some parents might have sheltered their kids, but mine, it was definitely targeted at me, and it was peers, and they made sure that I wasn't included in anything.
And do you think
they wanted me to give a talk or something, and then it was like, oh, Gail, we need you, and I finally told them, no, I won't do it.
Right.
It's like
so the fighting girl was there even then. Difficult times.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, talking of the fighting, Gail, because we were talking about this in our girly pre-show discussion also. So the actual source for this story doesn't seem to be on the internet in the same way as urban legends. Pinning them down to a source isn't easy to do anymore, and lots of these things were sourced on, if anyone remembers the old Mormon site, Holy Fetch, and so there's a lot of content on there. Now this is referred to by Sunstone, referencing this website where it would talk about it. But back in the day when Mormonism online was in its infancy, and there would be lots of sharing of stories, and people would be sending email chains with all of these uplifting stories, and that, I think, was one of the reasons why people were told not to be sharing something that you've heard in one state conference, because that's just for people of that stake, and we don't want to make it a comment for the whole church. That was all of this was sort of originating then. But those of you who were sort of there for that stage may remember this story that I would love to quote, but and maybe if you have it still in your email records, actually, we'd quite like to see that, so that Gail can fully see the story again and relive all its glorious trauma. But the story was presented in a really beautiful way, that a family with a child who has Down syndrome, and this child is genderless, as all of these children with disabilities are. So we don't know if male, female, whatever. This child goes to receive their patriarchal blessing with their parents. And when this child is receiving their patriarchal blessing, the state patriarch puts his hands on the child's head and tells the family that the reason the child has Down syndrome is because the child was one of Satan's escorts who escorted Satan when he was being cast out of heaven. And following this, that's how righteous this child was, and that is the reason that they are. And I think they'd put it a bit like they have been restrained on this earth because they are so sacred and so holy, and they had this incredible calling. And afterwards, the child's disabilities are removed while they bear testimony, and it's a really eloquent testimony. Everyone's in tears, and then back to normal as we leave. And I was one of the people who was sharing this and thinking, oh, this is so special and so powerful. I have goosebumps. Having a child who has disabilities, for someone to know they're sacred is an important thing. All children are sacred. This was something else. Gail, can you talk a little bit about why that was extremely unhealthy?
Can we first stop the steam from coming out of my ears? No kidding. I said I'd be nice. I don't know that I can be on this. What the hell are they doing giving a child with a Down syndrome who doesn't have good comprehension of patriarchal blessing, for starters?
Correct.
Like that.
Alan points out this is an urban legend, that this is likely completely made up for a whole host of different reasons. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. I would hear stuff like that when I was working with this population. I just had to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen how this particular population behaves. No. These people can be downright manipulative. And that's from my experience. You just, okay, so I'm going to go focus on this. What we're hearing is a theodicy. The theodicy is they were so valiant, and yet the cognitive dissonance on this is they were such low, unvaliant people that they begged for anybody to come down in. Okay, church, which is it? The theodicy and the fantasy, or the reality of the quotes that we have? You know, I'm a strong person. If I weren't, I might have ended up like my husband. But I was fortunate. I was sheltered from it. No one has the right to degrade a population of people and state that they were so bad that they fought for a body that was disabled. And now I'm going to say something that's going to totally blow people's minds. If I was given a choice of a pill that would fix it, or remaining the same, as hard as it is, I would not swallow that pill, because my disability is part of my makeup. It's not who I am completely, but it's absolutely made me who I am. The struggles, the hardships, the understanding, it's given me insight into others, people of color, the LGBTQIA community. I have an understanding that I would not have otherwise. And I have a way of relating. And for some of my clients who reside in the fringes, on the margins of society, either as people of color or disabled, whatever it might be, the fact that they can relate to me as a disabled person who is willing to go into that area of intersectionality is a huge plus.
Yeah.
But it's not in the church. Society is accepting it, but the church, the LDS church, isn't. That's part of the reason why God sent me away.
Gail, what role did discovering all these obnoxious, awful quotes that were made by some leaders, what role did that play in you deciding that you were going to leave the LDS church? if they did play a role in that.
It did, but I didn't know that it did until much later.
Right.
I had a very velvet faith transition. Most people's faith transitions are not calm, cool, or collected. But mine was such that, I went down the rabbit hole. I binged all kinds of crazy podcasts, learned all kinds of crazy things. But when it came time in 2018, in March of 2018, to really sit with it, God said, you've got to leave the LDS church. I didn't understand why at the time. I sat on my bed and I sobbed. And after I collected myself, I thought, what am I going to do about it? It took me 3 months to get up the courage to write a letter, and another 3 months to make the move that I needed to make. It took me 6 months to come up and be at total peace with it. But what I found out is from making the move in the community of Christ, where I am accepted, and the disability, there might be questions, but it's like, well, okay, they're curious, but I've never been told no. That's
I
what
love
I love that. I love that you feel accepted in community of Christ, and that you've never been told, and that all of you is accepted. You don't have to leave a part of you at the door, because all of you is accepted. And we hear this frequently with people with community of Christ, that they feel that all of them is accepted, whereas sometimes in the LDS church people are leaving a bit of them behind.
But what she doesn't do, did you notice, Sarah? So we're just going to talk about how cool Gail is for a second. Did you notice, though, that what she's not doing is making them perfect? She's not pedestalizing community of Christ either.
Absolutely,
they are not perfect.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that everyone's bought into that. Yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, and absolutely not perfect by any means of the stretch of the imagination. Good people, but far from perfect, as indeed are all of us.
Right.
Correct.
So, Gail, so you became aware sometime after you left the LDS church that actually some of the impact of how you'd been treated and some of the subconscious almost messages you'd been given about disability had impacted on you. Can you tell us a little bit about how that awareness came upon you?
I have to share an experience when I was 9. I'm sitting in primary, and there she went. We lost Jane.
She'll be back. Hold faith.
I'll just wait.
Yeah. I would hold faith and keep talking, Gail. Jane will be back with us any minute.
Okay. I'll just go on. Are we still broadcasting? Okay.
As far as I can tell.
Okay. I was sitting in.
There you go. We're all coming back. I'm not sure what happened there at all.
Okay.
I think I was speaking into the void. So just to re-emphasize, as I was saying, to sort of fill some time while we worked out what was happening. Alan, your comments are phenomenal. I'd love for you to share more about Utah and school district, and not being federal law. I'd love to hear a bit more about that. But let's come back to Gail. You were saying.
Yeah. Okay. I was born I'm a native Californian, people. Darn proud of it. And I'm sitting in weekday primary, and this is back in the 1960s. And I had a little we called them bandalos, but I haven't been able to find anything to confirm that. But they had these little, they had sequins on them, and we could earn different things. So I'm sitting there wearing this. I'm in primary, in opening exercises. And they start playing, and they start teaching a new piece of music to us. And it goes like this. Whenever I hear the song of a bird, and I thought, I don't hear right. I can't see the bird. This isn't safe. And I'm thinking this at 9. And it shut me down. I thought, at that time, I looked down at my little bandolo, and there were now rhinestones missing. There were little picture thingies missing off of it because it was discriminatory. I had to be helped to do a cross stitch. I could knit. I got that one, but I couldn't crochet. And there were things I couldn't do because I couldn't see well or hear well. So if you fast forward that into adulthood, I'm not necessarily going to answer the question that was asked. This is about spiritual healing. This is about spending time with God in a safe place that allows for acceptance. It's about spending time not having to be perfect, but rather having to be the best I can be. Not having to be unmarriageable because I was disabled, but just being the best person I can be. And the legacy of what Brother Brigham started and set in motion literally sent me from the faith of my upbringing to something new. And it literally caused me to have to question all of it and to reevaluate as an imperfectly, perfectly whole adult that I'm okay. And if society has issues with me, so be it. If people of faith have issue with me, so be it. But I'm good. And it's a lot of spiritual work to do that.
Yeah, you're good.
Did you have... Right, race you. Go. Who's going to ask the question first? Because we are tripping over each other. Go. You go first, Sarah.
Did the LDS Church ever show any adaptations to enable you to serve or to do things that are kind of rites of passage in the church?
No.
Okay.
I was in a position where I had I served in a young women's presidency, and I also served on I served with the youth in a pilot program as well. And I had to find ways of getting to church at night and when I didn't drive at night. And it was a very inconvenient feeling. It's like, oh, we have to pick you up. Oh, you incapable person.
Right.
Ouch. So I had that, but at the same time, it's like, well, we'll call you as secretary, but we don't really want you to do anything because really you can't.
To pick up, again, repeating trigger warnings here. please look after yourselves, people. But I feel like so many people will be able to relate or have had this touch their lives. The statistics on it means it's almost certainly the case. If you have been anywhere near the internet over the past several years, you will have probably seen an image where it's a gravestone, and the gravestone, the grave marker is a child in a wheelchair who is being lifted out of the wheelchair because they're being lifted up into heaven, that they are now unburdened from this disability. And it's really problematic for me. If this is how a particular family understands and memorialize their child, I don't mean to take a pot shot at that. You cope how you cope. What I guess I've been sort of struggling a bit with, and what I'd love to hear your thoughts on, is how disability intersects with mental health. They happen together naturally anyway. When you have someone who, for example, has autism, that may go hand in hand with eating disorders, that may go hand in hand with extreme anxiety, suicidal ideation, and self-harm type behaviors. So first of all, I want to ask you, how do you see, because in Mormonism, we are taught that you will be fixed. You will get to the other side and you will be fixed. And therefore, and I think this is where you point out your understanding of LGBTQ pain in many ways. The natural progression there is, well, I don't want to be here. I want to be fixed. And I would rather throw myself on the mercy of God than I would the mercy of my peers and my faith community, because this hurts so much. Could you speak a little bit about what you see as a healthy way? What does happen in the eternities? What's your understanding of that? And how can we better support people who are experiencing severe mental health issues, whether it is on its own as a diagnosis, or whether that goes in hand with a disability?
Oh my gosh. I'm going to use John as the example here. As I mentioned earlier, John committed suicide in 2016. And this was after he had done everything but ECT. And he wasn't a candidate for ECT because he had suffered one psychotic episode that also disqualified him for one of the treatment. He'd done everything. He worked hard. He took his medication religiously. And he didn't know if there was a heaven. He had hope. But he was not going there to get fixed. Right. Okay, that's part of the story. I understand the other part where someone might decide to take their own life because they think that if they get there, they're going to be fixed. And that's where mental health comes in. For starters, suicide is a real option for some, like my husband, who spent close to 60 years trying to fix it. And the pain was so bad. And in his case, he felt a second psychotic episode coming on. And that was his limit. And I know, because of what he told me, that God was okay with it. But that's not because he was doing it to escape. He was doing it because God gave him permission. And he had a therapist and a psychiatrist. He took his medication regularly. So where does mental health come in? when we've got anorexia, depression, mental health issues cloud the brain, and people aren't seeing it correctly, they're not hearing it correctly, they're not functioning correctly. It's like a circuit has been shut down. And what psychotherapy and medication can do in most situations, I'm not going to say all, because that's not an accurate fact, but what they can do is open up a conduit so that you can talk through the issues. I deal with people who are suicidal. Most of the time it happens because the resources to address the existing issues are not known to them, or they've run out of the resources. And when you start to talk to somebody, and I am not pro-suicide, when you start to talk to somebody, it's getting them the resources. If they are anorexic, it's getting them to the right treatment program, something that's going to work, something that's got clinical protocols that they can go through. Now, the LDS Church has a huge resource of finances, and they can help with this. I know this for a fact. I've got a nephew who was put through an addictions recovery program. I don't know what his drug of choice was, but he went through that program, and it was the LDS Church that paid for it. I can say that if we're talking to this, the biggest fear a lot of time with people is, oh, nobody else is like me. That's where some support groups can come in. Oh, nobody else can possibly feel the doom and the gloom that I feel. This must be normal. And then when they find out it's not, it's like the burden is lifted off of them. And all of a sudden, the desire to engage in life becomes whole. And it's an amazing process to watch. I've seen it both as a psychotherapist. I've seen it both as a spiritual director, where people's burdens are lifted. So I don't know whether that's answering your question.
It absolutely does, and I think it's important, I feel, to point out how I'm always very conscious of the fact, as I know as Sarah is too, that when someone transitions out of the Brighamite, sort of the Latter-day Saint Mormonism, that looking back, it's you know, it's hard. It's really, really hard. You don't want to be taken back into that space. And when we have people on the show who are from other faith groups, and particularly Community of Christ, because there is that relationality there, there's those sort of things that we have in common while it's completely different. To have a member of Community of Christ and someone who holds priesthood in Community of Christ to look back and be commenting in a negative way about, you know, Latter-day Saint experience does not come easy to you. And I really understand that. So your willingness to speak about this subject I guess I just want to acknowledge that since Sarah and I have been involved, well, before we were involved in safeguarding work, but the entirety of this journey, Gail has been here supporting where she is, because you have an understanding, you have a background, and you can, you're very aware of what needs to be done. You have very clear senses about what needs to happen. So what I would ask, at this point is, knowing what you know, and obviously, and I'm conscious of the fact that you are in a faith organization and very, very happy there. From a safeguarding point of view, what could have been done to make sure that your family's experiences were as safe as they possibly could be? What would good safeguarding look like in a faith community?
Woo! I think someone was bribed to ask that question, but I'm not quite sure.
It just came out.
Okay, that is huge. As I was listening to this, I think the first thing I have to say on the exit side of this, and I've seen this with the people I work with who have moved through a faith tradition, and there are many outcomes for that. I think that in general, faith communities as a whole need to be aware of the mental health issues. And I want to put a plug in for a series of books that was done in the UK. There's a series of books on church, disability in church, mental health in church, LGBTQ in church. And right now, the other two are slipping my mind. You can go on Amazon and Google it. They are there. But holding space for those in diverse communities, becoming aware of mental health issues. And I'm speaking to many people, and not just LDS or Community of Christ for that matter. Zion is a hard thing to build, and we're still building it. It takes hard work. And one of the big issues, one of the big pleas I can make is that the average churchgoer is not trained professionally. Don't try to counsel somebody yourself when you don't have the correct tools. There are professionals waiting and willing to help people. And there are resources for that. I think for families, family systems need to become open to the possibility of including more people as support members. This is a huge issue, especially in the LDS church, where it can tend to get insular. And it's okay to let people from the world in. They might have gifts that you need to receive so that your son, your daughter, your trans member, whoever they may be, your questioning member, your disabled member, they can stay around. They can actually live a full and complete life with Christmases and birthdays and special holidays. so that they don't have the desire to go to heaven to get fixed. Because that's the bottom line. If we don't offer the support of saying you're okay as you are, you're whole as you are, and God loves you and you are worthy of God's love as you are. If we don't offer those, that's failure.
Yeah.
And when we offer that, that's success.
That's beautiful. That message cannot be more important, that the worth of every single individual, regardless of what is happening in their life, regardless of where they sit, where they stand, the worth of every person to God cannot be overestimated, cannot be stressed too much. The worth of individuals, and we don't need to die to be fixed, because we're good enough as we are. None of us need to die to get fixed. We need to live another day when life is really up against us. Live another day, but we don't need to die to get fixed. We're good enough. We are good enough.
Yeah, I want to, I suppose, do a request from my point of view. For one of the things that I would love to see happening, that I think would be really helpful in safeguarding, is wild talks and special broadcasts. It's great if you talk about disabilities. That's a wonderful thing. But how much more important is it to have the voice of someone who is experienced in these things be amplified to tell us what that experience is like? And Gail, with that, I'm aware that this could sound pedestalizing, so it's because it's really, really important to me.
Yeah.
My child cannot communicate. My adult son cannot communicate to me how he feels, and when he's, when he's anxious, it's feelings, it's emotion, it's tears and terror, and it's frightening.
Yeah.
To hear someone verbalize, give words to what he is experiencing, I cannot thank you enough to have these kind of insults that help me understand a little bit more about what his experience is. So I really want to just thank you for that, and I suppose beg whichever faith community or not faith community, just in society, for people to be extended opportunities to be able to hear what that experience is like. One of the parts of the work of certainly in the UK, I'm not sure how much work they do in other countries, but Holocaust Memorial Day, while it focuses on experiences around the Holocaust and marking the history of that, it also picks up on exactly the themes that you're talking about, Gail, that where Brigham, where the church started with that marginalizing and othering, and the levels of where people are going to end up and how righteous they have clearly been, and all of these loyalty tests. It plays out throughout history in very, very frightening ways. And so what some of the work it is doing is about anti-bullying. It's going into schools and talking about how disabled people have been bullied and hurt and hit, going about their daily lives by people who are just who are in the street. Now, these things to me are unthinkable. I want to imagine a church where, surely pedestalizing has got to be better than hurting, but it's two sides of the same coin. It leads to very different effects. You either get to be up there on a pedestal or away down there, as we were talking about earlier, in the basement. So I think it plays out in very different ways when we use a language of othering, even when it's to make someone super special. When we're using dehumanizing language, you're an angel or you're a monster.
Yep. And I can't tell you how many Relief Society meetings both my mother and I sat in where this was done. And we had a time when we were in the same ward together as adults. And I had returned from my mission and so forth and so on. and somebody started pedestalizing, and my mother did not say, "Down, Gail, down." She said, "Rip, Gail, rip."
Yes.
And I did. And I said, "How dare you do that? How dare you put somebody with a disability on a pedestal? You know, a pedestal is very confining. You can't get down off it.
Mm.
And when you can't get down off it, that's a bad thing."
Right.
So what do? You jump and you hurt yourself. And that's a really bad thing.
And no one's there to catch you. When you fall, you fall.
No, there isn't. So I am very anti-pedestal. I just don't see that at all. And I wish I wish society would honor those who are on the spectrum somewhere, who don't have the words to speak, who only have their actions. And sometimes those actions are misperceived. Oh, they're acting out. No, they're not acting out. They're trying to tell you how they feel if you'll just shut up and use your eyes instead of your judgmental head. They're trying to tell you, they're giving you a message. And unless we listen with our hearts, listen with our eyes, and open our ears to hear that, we're going to miss a gift. And that's the gift of disability.
We are so lucky to have you in our lives. Do you know that? This woman is my friend. Aren't I lucky? I have loved this. I've loved every moment. And I know that we're going to have a lot of people reaching out to sort of ask more questions. And I really hope this does spark a discussion. Gail, do you want to tell us what's in the future for you? What are your plans? What are you up to? And if anyone wants to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Well, I have a website at www.thegiftofbeingheard. That's where my blog is. And that's where I run my private practice out of. You can contact me there for either psychotherapy or spiritual direction. I just use the same email for both. My email is gail@beyondgriefandlosstherapy.com. Let's see what else. I also run a ministry for Community of Christ. We do it once a month on Wednesday evenings at 7 UK, 8 Central Europe. It's called Living Spiritual Practices. And one of the evangelists and I, so this is a Community of Christ thing, we run Living Spiritual Practices, and we do what we call pocket practices. And they are 10-minute spiritual practices that you can do mobily. So they have to be mobile in order for us to present them or do them. If they aren't, because you have a busy life, we don't want you stuck in a 20-minute practice. We want you in and out in 10 minutes. And something that you can focus on your own, in your own way, and on your own time, any time of the day or night if you need to. That's really what I'm doing. I'm working, and
and you're also working on you have a book in the works, and you're maintaining a website. You have a practice with lots of clients, and so you're working hard, and of course supporting Sarah, and it's just Really appreciated. As someone says in the comments, as Brenda says in the comments, we're all blessed to have Gail in our lives, even if we have never seen her in 3D. So we will have to arrange some kind of 3D 45 thing.
Oh, that makes my night.
Yeah, I love that. Gail, in closing, to take us out, is there anything that you would like to share that you haven't already said, or any message maybe for someone who may need to hear it tonight?
I'm glad you asked. I'd like to leave with some words, if I could. Well, I can, because you'll let me.
I'd love that.
Somewhere out there within the sound of my voice, someone's going to hear this and say, but I have no resources. I'm fed up. I'm worn out. I don't think I can do it again. I can't do another day. And I'm going to say, there are those who understand. There are support groups. There are people who will listen. Pastors, spiritual directors, therapists, friends who get it. Don't talk to the ones that don't. There are people out there who understand. And I understand. And I want you to know that there is no such thing as worthy, because we are all whole. We are all imperfectly, perfectly whole.
So beautiful. Thank you so much, Gail, and thank you for expressing your faith in such a powerful and wonderful way. This is how to do it. Thank you. We're going to be back soon. Sarah, I feel like you have a comment you'd like to make before we leave. I sense.
You sense that? Yeah, I do. It's been really good to have Gail on here talking tonight and talking about her experiences. Everybody experiences and lives Mormonism in very different ways, and it's been really powerful to hear Gail's experience of Mormonism and faith journey developing and evolving, and where that's moved Gail to today. And I think it's worth thinking about every faith community is hopefully on a journey that's going to take them from somewhere where they're trying to get to a sense of equality, and hopefully when they get there they will be moved on further to inclusivity and belonging, because belonging and equality are far apart from one another, and belonging is what we all aim for everybody, whether it's a disability, race, culture, sexuality, whatever it is. We're hoping to get to a point where people feel they belong in whichever faith community they feel planted and attached to. And I think to help with that journey, one of the things that would be incredibly powerful is for people to really live by listening to experts by experience. And certainly in our safeguarding work, there's a lot of stuff that we do is listening to people that are experts about safeguarding and abuse because of experience. And I think some of the training that is needed in many, many faith communities would benefit greatly from listening to experts by experience, like Gail talking.
Right. I wholeheartedly agree. As we leave you all tonight, obviously there's been things that were a lot. It's been incredibly inspiring and uplifting, despite the fact we've talked about really hard stuff. If you need additional support, having heard the variety of things that we've spoken about. We've put some links in the show notes. We would shout out in the UK for Samaritans. You can go onto your local NHS website, which will tell you some useful links. There's a whole variety. There's a variety on our website too, but those would be the ones that we would recommend. If you're in the US, and I got it wrong earlier, Alan corrected me, 911 for emergency support, and just reach out.
No, 999.
Okay, right, 999. Okay, so we will make sure all of those things are in the show notes, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you need someone to talk to tonight. And as we go on our way, as we settle down for tonight, we just, on behalf of Sarah and I, as I say, we wanted to have this conversation for a really long time. Gail, we bless you for all the work that you're doing. We bless your journey. We bless the important research and voice that you have. We bless you to be able to find joy and strength and what makes you sparkle, because tonight, this hard stuff, you sparkled right through. I mean, was everyone else getting the Carolyn Pearson vibes too? Because I love this. We need audiobooks read by this woman, Gail. It's so wonderful. And so, yeah, we bless your voice. Keep raising it. And I'm glad that you're in a place where you can do that now without having to feel shame around it. Everyone, we will be back super soon. If you need to reach out for any reason, you know where we are. You can get a hold of us via our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel. I think it's going to be Sunday night. We're back with the Inside Out team, and we have lots of really important things in the pipeline. I'm sure we will be back with Gail at some point too. We wish you all a wonderful night, and thanks for being with us. Good night, everyone.